Avant de commencer les études de journalisme, moi j'avais une vision vraiment sur le côté enquête, le rôle d'enquêteur du journaliste, parce que je suis fan de cinéma, donc moi je voyais les films Les Hommes du Président avec Robert Redford et Dustin Hoffman.
Avant de vouloir devenir journaliste, je voyais les journalistes comme des intellectuels, des gens qui savaient un peu tout ce qui se passait dans le monde. J'étais en admiration, je voyais Jean-Paul Sartre, je voyais des figures comme ça qui fument en discutant politique et qui refont le monde jusqu'à 2h du matin.
Tu leggi i giornali?
No.
Che rapporto hai con i giornali?
Bruttissimo, li uso per andare in bagno.
Fidarsi dei giornalisti è un po' difficile, in quanto possiamo fare un'intervista o loro possono comunque riprendere alcune cose e dopo scrivere sul giornale quello che per loro è fondamentale, solamente una certa parte della frase, quindi rigirare la frittata come vogliono loro.
Ti dicono forza la notizia, forzala perché così attrai il lettore del web.
Se una cosa viene divulgata ovunque ed è finta, io sarò una classica persona che ci casca perché l'ho letto qui e quindi mi fido, purtroppo.
We are so well connected to the internet, and so it's really easy to find out whether some information is accurate or not.
I inform myself mostly through social media.
That social media presence is right now, right in your hands.
Sono assolutamente dipendente dal cellulare.
J'ai besoin d'être tout le temps au courant parce que j'ai tout le temps cette peur que quelqu'un me parle d'un événement que moi je n'ai pas vu passer.
Sometimes I feel sorry for the next generation because you have so much information to get.
Do you trust journalism in general?
I would like to.
Uno legge una notizia magari e dopo un'ora leggi il contrario di tutto di quella notizia.
It's also hard to differentiate between, pundits and journalists and infotainment.
Gattini e bambini che cadono dalle scale non sono il massimo per testate importanti.
Si parla di 5 euro a pezzo oppure si parla di collaborazioni dove guadagna alla fine del mese tra i 600 e i 700 euro.
Bisognerebbe rallentare, magari anche staccare, cioè non si può aprire la televisione e avere notizie H24.
Slow news. I don't know.
Slow news. Non mi viene in mente nulla, onestamente, no.
Slow news.
Slow journalism sounds like a very nice idea, but you can explain it for me?
Sono stato per tanti anni direttore di una testata giornalistica italiana digitale che si chiama Blogo. Producevamo a volte anche 400 articoli al giorno, che ovviamente non potevo leggere tutti, il che per un direttore responsabile è un oggettivo problema, e ha avuto come conseguenza il fatto che questa ossessione di stare sempre attaccato al monitor a guardare non tanto la qualità dei pezzi che venivano prodotti quanto la quantità di click che si facevano mi ha reso un iperteso.
Lavoravo per il più grosso editore digitale italiano che era Blogo e pubblicavo 14, 15, 20 pezzi al giorno. Il problema è che alla fine della giornata io non mi ricordavo quello che era successo quella stessa mattina.
Spinebar.
Ciao Albe.
Senti, volevo dirti che niente, ci risiamo, mi hanno chiamato dall'editore, facciamo pochi click.
Come pochi click?
Pochi impression per i banner, i ricavi non vanno bene, quindi si ricomincia coi tagli. Mi dispiace dirtelo così, sto facendo il giro di telefonate, ho voluto dirlo a te per primo. Nel giro di poco mandiamo le comunicazioni. Tra l'altro ne approfitto per dirti che magari sarebbe il momento per vederci per quell'altro progettino lì.
Vediamoci sì.
Sono un giornalista e sono pagato per creare polemiche, per creare dibattiti online e fare in modo che arrivino più click possibili nel giornale per cui lavoro, che è poi il motivo per cui mi pagano. Mi ritrovo a lavorare in velocità, scrivere le cose rapidamente senza poter affinare o approfondire troppo, perché devo fare click, devo fare quantità, perché è la metrica su cui valutano il mio lavoro, perché è la metrica su cui pagano il mio lavoro. e a un certo punto ho proprio sentito il bisogno di rallentare.
Stiamo trattando le notizie esattamente come se fossero cibo spazzatura. E quindi mi sono detto, visto che per reazione ad un certo punto è nato il movimento slow food nel cibo, non è che da qualche parte nel mondo ci sarà qualcuno che sta facendo qualche cosa che parla di slow news? E quindi l'ho cercato su Google. Ho trovato Peter Laufer, che è un professore universitario dell'Oregon che aveva scritto un libro che si intitolava proprio Slow News.
Peter è un personaggio che dovreste conoscere tutti.
Dr. Peter Laufer, who is the Wallace Chair?
That is correct,
Very
sir.
good, the Wallace Chair. He's been with us for quite a while. He's an amazing conference right now, Slow News. And I'll let him explain what that is. It's not for people who read things slowly. That's not the point. But he's going to come in and chat with us a little bit about that. So welcome to Peter Laufer.
Thank you very much, Professor Morris, and the two of us have a good vaudeville act, which we may engage in now. But I wanted to just tell you a little bit about slow news. And this is something I wrote a book about a few years ago that, in fact, was first published in Italy. I wrote a book about butterflies, and the Italian language edition came out. I went to talk with my publisher, and we were in a restaurant in Milano having a nice leisurely lunch, and it just was natural that we started to talk about how maybe we should slow down news.
L'idea che Alberto mi propose, quella di rallentare e di provare a fare un prodotto molto ragionato, mi ha entusiasmato dall'inizio.
Ho cominciato a chiamare un po' di colleghi, amici, con i quali stavo condividendo questa sensazione, diciamo, proprio di disagio rispetto al tipo di giornalismo, se vogliamo chiamarlo ancora così, che stavamo facendo, no? Quindi ci siamo sentiti, alcuni lavoravano con me in blog, altri avevano lavorato con me, alla fine ci siamo messi in quattro a cercare di fare qualche cosa di diverso e anche a cercare di raccontarlo in questo documentario. Ciao ragazzi! Ciao! Allora, il primo appuntamento che abbiamo per la disseminazione dell'idea slow news in giro per il mondo è a Perugia. E a Perugia abbiamo due panel. Uno è quello che facciamo con Lea Korsgaard, che è la direttrice di Zetland. Poi vabbè c'è Peter Laufer, ovviamente, ma lui è il nostro mentor e il nostro Gandalf. Poi c'è Günther Müller del Forum Journalism and Media. E poi vabbè ci sono io che tenterò di parlare in inglese, quindi sarà una cosa... ci divertiremo.
I mean, in general, everything can be fabricated, and comments can also be fabricated. And what's happening with Facebook's algorithm change is it's valuing comments and discussion as a metric to actually decide whether to give a piece of content more distribution. So what we have now are people gaming comments, and you'll see like hundreds of people who just like put a sticker or, you know, insane amounts of reactions that have all just been automated. So you also just have to question everything you're seeing, because any of this stuff can be fabricated. You know, we just saw how an audience can basically be fabricated. Everything you're looking at can be fabricated.
The worst thing journalists could do is look at like the problems of misinformation and the problems of falling trust in the media and say, well, this is because of other things. This is because of technology. This is because of Trump. This is because of this or that. We absolutely share some blame in the way that people perceive us. And yes, there are folks who are powerful who are attacking the media right now. But how accountable are we about the work we do? How transparent are we about the work we do? And what do we value in terms of what we cover? You know, the old saying in English is if it bleeds, it leads. And so covering violence, covering conflict, you know, covering things that are maybe light and not as important, over time they can have an impact. So we have to look at ourselves and we have to think about how we adapt what we do to this new world. And I think one of the big things is figuring out, is there a way for us to regain some of the trust that's been lost? Because if you look around the world, I mean, the media is not very trusted at this point in time.
Uè, Bru, ciao, come stai?
Una meraviglia, dimmi tutto.
Visto che ieri Zuckerberg è andato in audizione al Senato e non so se l'hai vista, ma l'hanno veramente bullizzato sui social, adesso sono tutti lì a dire c'aveva la giacca e la cravatta, non c'aveva la t-shirt, quindi gli hanno fatto cambiare stile, non sa parlare in pubblico, si impappinava, quindi è un babbo. Come titolo io pensavo una cosa tipo avete bullizzato Zuckerberg, ora la sua reazione sarà...
fare il culo.
Ah, così?
Sì, qualcosa del genere.
Ok, va bene. Io te lo mollo per le 8, massimo. Perché adesso dobbiamo fare anche altre interviste.
No, per le 8 no, deve essere prima delle 8. Però mandami un messaggino quando c'è.
Va bene, appena è pronto te lo mando.
D'accordo.
Dai, un abbraccio. Ciao.
A lot of news organizations had their website and were trying to get as much traffic as possible. It was a race to get big, and they wanted scale, and everybody sort of figured out that, oh, you can get a lot of attention by writing content that generated outrage, by stuff that played to people's biases, and so things certainly got skewed. The incentives were to go a little more extreme. The incentives were to just pump out tons of content.
Ma tu hai qualche aspettativa da questo pezzo in particolare?
Spero che giri un po', ma in realtà è abbastanza semplificato rispetto a quello che volevo dire.
If you want the trust of the public, you have to begin by trusting them.
Ciao, mi chiamo Hermes Magliolica, ho 25 anni e sono socio di un'azienda metalmeccanica che si chiama la Geller Grigliati e ho scelto una serie di oggetti per raccontarmi. Prima di tutto sono molto appassionato di calcio e non so se lo ricordate, ex giocatore del Milan Luther Blissett, e qui ho l'action figure con l'autografo. Poi sono molto appassionato di musica, soprattutto di questo gruppo qua, questo gruppo musicale che conosceranno in molti, insomma. E qui c'è il giornale di cui ero il direttore in collaborazione con Frigider e Il Male, è una rivista di racconti brevi. Poi, ovviamente, essendo uno studente universitario, ho avuto dei titoli accademici, qui abbiamo dei titoli accademici della Sapienza. Io in realtà non sono un tipo tecnologico, sono tanto da 6 anni che ho Facebook, ho proprio la connessione internet e sono sempre stato contrario alla tecnologia, non avevo nemmeno un'email, a malapena il telefono, anche quello da poco. Per me la tecnologia era una forma di controllo e siccome ero un personaggio un po' fuori dagli schemi, no? E adesso mi vedo vestito così, quando ero un ragazzo ero un panchettone di strada in senso proprio di strada, che vivevo per strada, chiedevo spiccetti fuori dai supermercati. E quindi vi dico questo perché? Per farvi capire il personaggio per una volta davanti ad internet doveva informarsi sui siti di controinformazione. Così anch'io sono caduto, diciamo, in questi siti di complotti o di verità scomode, di informazione non ufficiale, però è durata poco. Appena mi sono reso conto che molte di queste notizie, insomma, non erano verificate ed erano, insomma, fuffa, ho cominciato un pochino a dirlo anche agli altri. Ho scritto in dei gruppi, sempre nei social, non nei gruppi di discussione, e quando lo dicevo, guardate, questa notizia non è vera, questo sito non è un giornale, così non mi dava retta a nessuno. Così da lì ho deciso a fare il primo scherzo, la prima beffa.
Che cos'è il genio? È fantasia, intuizione, colpo d'occhio, velocità d'educazione. Il genio è Hermes Magliolica. Il principale creatore di bufale italiano, ok? Ne ha create moltissime e hanno avuto moltissimo successo perché lui, oltre a creare bufale, è capace di farle diventare virali, no? Che è la vera cosa importante. Quindi non semplicemente racconta palle, ma fa in modo che queste palle vengano credute e vengano diffuse.
Ho scaricato l'immagine del ministro Yang, ricordate il ministro? E gli ho messo, e ho fatto con Paint, ovviamente non sono pratico col computer, questa foto, una citazione scritta con Paint che diceva che le casse popolari sarebbero andate alle categorie più svantaggiate, tipo i zingari e i rettiliani. Ovviamente, non so se sapete, i rettiliani è una razza aliena, no? Che non esiste, penso che non esista, e la gente ha cominciato a commentare tantissimo, migliaia di persone hanno cominciato ad attaccare il ministro Yang. Non ci stava nemmeno un commento che diceva attenti ragazzi, una bufala. No, erano tutti commenti contro il ministro, era una scusa, insomma, per attaccare l'avversario politico. Cosa succedeva? Che all'improvviso ritrovavo queste citazioni inventate da me, articolate proprio con articoli anche di 2 pagine su gli stessi blog dove all'inizio mi informavo io. Quindi da lì ho capito tutto il meccanismo, tutto il giro che fa l'informazione in rete. Si parte dal basso, da un gruppo, poi piano piano ci casca qualche blog, no? Che blog è così, poi magari un sito un po' più affermato, alla fine se funziona può arrivare ai giornali. È una specie di divulgazione piramidale al contrario.
There has been misinformation forever. There has been propaganda forever. The tools and the techniques change, but at the core of it, people spreading things that they hope to be true or they want to be true or they aligns with their previous beliefs. I mean, that's been going on forever. And if you actually look at some of the first printed news books that would sort of be distributed in coffee shops in like 1500s or what have you, stuff in there was like total bullshit. They were talking about, dragons being found in the woods, and they were talking about the discovery of the Antichrist and all this stuff. And so those origins was often made up. It was fables and tales, and that's what entertained people. But over time, there was this discipline that emerged of actually trying to gather and verify information, of actually trying to inform people. And so that was journalism, but it wasn't always an inherent thing, but telling people stories that entertained them was.
Se ci sono 20 persone su 100 che ci possono cascare, in realtà dopo quelle che interagiscono sono molto di più, che ci può cascare anche qualcuno che non ci crede ma interagisce soltanto per rabbia, perché risponde, casca non nella bufala ma nella provocazione. Bisogna cercare di provocare per far interagire più persone possibili.
When you're actually trying to debunk something, you are restricted to the facts, and you're also coming second because the fake has to get out there for you to debunk it. But the other piece of it that like I struggle with at times, and I think a lot of people do, is that you just sort of seem like an annoying, nagging person to be like, no, that's not true. Like the last thing your friends want when they share something on Facebook is for you to add a comment saying, actually that's not true, and put a Snopes link, because it's embarrassing to them.
Le bufale non è solo un problema di questi siti clickbaiting, ma anche giornalisti che insomma da questo giornalismo veloce che alla fine sono anche loro stessi cadono nei tranelli.
Many publishers thought you could just make lots of crap, so-called clickbait, and then get lots of money from the advertising.
È diventata una cosa commerciale, non è più una cosa come negli anni 90 con il Luther Blissett, diciamo, o il situazionismo di Guy Debord.
But none of us control pricing in digital. The pricing of digital advertising is controlled by Facebook and Google and other very big players. And it's very hard to be distinctive, to do something different. And the danger for a publisher who bases their model entirely on digital advertising, and particularly on digital display advertising, is you end up making crap which isn't worth paying for, and making stuff which is the same as everything everyone else is doing on the internet.
There is, I think, a good way to make good quality things spread. So that idea of viral as only being a bad thing, we have to reorient that and have journalists think about, how do I get the good stuff to spread?
We not just like to be informed, we get a rush. We get a dopamine rush from that what's next, what's next, what's next. We can't avoid it. We look for it. We check incoming because we want to be wanted and we want to know something more. And that's why I argue here that the onus is on us as consumers. We have to decide to limit and go a day where you walk in the park without these things.
And if you were out taking your walk on 9/11?
If you lived in Manhattan, you would know immediately what was going on because you would see it, smell it, hear it, or somebody would tell you. And if you lived in Eugene, Oregon that day, you did not need to know immediately. And somebody was going to tell you anyway. You didn't need to have that phone in your ear to be told immediately.
There's always been fake news. The digital distribution of fake news at scale, and in particular, the habit of some politicians to retweet and to spread fake news and to give it a validity because they treat it as if it's true, I think is new.
I troll, volenti o nolenti, hanno educato l'utente medio alla rete, poi allo stesso tempo hanno anche fatto scuola a qualche cattivo e al potere, perché il troll in realtà dovrebbe essere una presa in giro del sistema, invece alla fine il sistema ha assorbito il trolling.
Se un politico dice una balla particolarmente ad effetto, quella lì è facile che si propaghi velocissimamente, mentre invece magari per verificarla ci si mette giorni o ore. Però se un tema è persistente nel dibattito pubblico, magari lì riesce a intervenire.
I think we're in a battle. And by the way, liars always like to accuse everyone else of lying.
È una partita che non si gioca sulla singola balla, diciamo.
Okay.
È più una partita che si gioca nel lungo periodo, cioè nel fatto che il dibattito pubblico sia interessato alla verità o meno di un'affermazione, nel fatto che quindi anche il politico sappia che gli può essere chiesto conto di quello che ha detto.
La strategia del troll è individuare i gruppi dove può funzionare un tema, e la stessa cosa fanno alcuni politici, riescono a creare dei gruppi social dove raggruppano tutte le persone più o meno polarizzate in quell'idea, e così riescono a innescare delle notizie false là dentro e dare la soluzione, che sono sempre il suo partito politico.
Where they think they can control the truth because they won't be contradicted, because the media won't dare to contradict them.
Con il fact-checking cerchiamo di dare contesto a una dichiarazione. Quindi il numero può essere vero, ma l'interpretazione può essere molto dubbia. Al singolo dato si possono dare molte interpretazioni, a volte anche opposte.
C'è qualcosa di vero in tutto quello che mi hai detto?
Beh, 50 e 50.
I'm a news junkie, and we probably all are. We're in this business. Let me close by reading the dedication to this book, which shows that I'm a recovering news junkie, maybe. And this book I dedicated to my wife, Sheila. She and I met in Nevada, and we lived in a little town out in the desert. And the dedication is with love to Sheila, of course. With love to Sheila. They're Italians here, right? With love to Sheila, who questioned my priorities whenever I drove our old Chevy pickup 17 miles across the Nevada desert just to buy the latest edition of the San Francisco Chronicle. So I suffer from this. That's why I preach.
And I might add, this is available in the lobby for $15.95, and with a signed copy is $20.
Once it was difficult, it was expensive, it took knowledge and a lot of money to move information, to move news from Italy to Denmark. That was difficult. It was worth paying money for. Today, it's not costly. It's not difficult to move information from Italy to Denmark. So why should I pay for it? That's why the news industry is in big trouble, right? Because it's not worth paying for news today. So what makes journalism valuable today? It's not only to move information, it's to understand information, to put information in context, to tell us why it's important. That's worth paying for.
So in a way, slow journalism transcends everything. Like, it's not a movement, it's a way to treat information.
Sure, it's a movement, and we have a manifesto, and we're on the march, but it's journalism.
It's a practice.
It's a practice of journalism. It's perhaps a way for us to remind ourselves and others what we should be doing with this amazing concept of finding out what's going on and telling others what's going on.
Are slow journalism and social media enemies?
No, the equipment is never an enemy. Not the camera, not your pen, not your recorder. None of these things are enemies. They're all tools. We're the ones who need to be in charge, and we're allowing ourselves too often to be ruled by the tools. But the tools are magic. We want to take advantage of them. We want to enjoy them. We want to make them work for us, not against us.
Paper is a technology as well, right?
Yeah.
And so it depends on what we use it for.
Okay. Yeah, and paper can be fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
of course.
Paper can be fast.
Yeah, and paper can be, full of shitty news as well.
Right.
So.
Right.
when I met Peter and said, hey, let's meet and talk about the slow news panel. And I said, yeah, I will text you a message. And he said, no, let's make it the slow news way. Forget about the mobile phone. We just make an agreement now where we're going to meet. So my first thing is, Peter, I would tell this story to the audience and would say, Peter, does that mean that everybody who is sitting here in the audience Twittering and Facebooking should leave if we want to have a slow news panel?
I have a challenge, okay? So give me this option. I've been watching, can I grab this and just take it? I've been watching this woman right here, and you've been for the last, what is your name? Zuza. Zuza here for the last 10 minutes or so has been mightily on your mobile phone. Would you give it to me, please?
I'm not sure that I will.
Well, I'll give it back to you. I will give it back to you, okay? So we'll test this, Gunter, okay?
Sure.
And Zuza, we will hold this for you, and when the panel is over, we'll give it back to you and see how you do without it for an hour, okay?
Great, Peter.
She says.
Is this your definition of slow news?
Well, this is a definition because she will be without this and will, in theory, be more present.
Okay. I have to say I'm very skeptical about the whole concept of slow news. To me, it's just another expression of doing journalism, if I understood this book right. Can you give me a definition of what slow news is to you?
Sure, but I'm going to give this back to Susan,
please.
Because I see a little bit of
Okay, Peter is
yes
busy with the mobile phones. Should I start with Lea?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, I think so too.
We do have to be aware that these products are built to trap you in there. That's how they're optimized. And so being aware of that and realizing, I just spent 20 minutes and all I did was scroll Twitter and I didn't really do anything and I got nothing from it. Like, I'm in that position all the time where I could be doing other things, but instead I just sit there and I refresh Twitter. And it is a weird zombie-like behavior, but it's also what these things are engineered to do. I mean, I used to smoke cigarettes, and at the core of it, one of the things that helped me quit was I realized that cigarettes were basically just something to do. And literally they could kill me, first of all. But second was it was just like, it was a ritual, and it was something that I could do in a moment where I didn't have anything else to do or I was nervous. And I think the phone has taken that place for me and for a lot of other people. Like, it's something to do. You're standing around, you're waiting for someone, you've got 5 minutes, so you're gonna open your phone and do it. And it's taken up space that might have been occupied by quiet thinking or listening to music or talking to someone.
My mother told me, when we started smoking when I was young, we didn't know it was bad for you. Nobody told us that until later when we were already hooked. And I wonder, with that story in mind, what's going to happen to us when we look back on this time in 10, 20 years? Be like, Jesus, do you remember when our cell phones were jam-packed with breaking news 24/7? We didn't know back then what that was doing to our brains and to our attention span.
Viviamo in un'epoca dove la dimensione del tempo è cambiata, dobbiamo fare tutto immediatamente, perciò di fatto il nostro cervello è sovraccaricato da questo numero di informazioni.
Se queste informazioni arrivano anche a livello multimediale da diverse modalità sensoriali, perché non solo siamo abituati a leggere più informazioni, ma poi le possiamo anche ricevere contemporaneamente, che ne so, da video, a quel punto non c'è più solo un problema di elaborare un numero di informazioni dal punto di vista visivo perché le devo leggere, ma anche un numero di informazioni che raggiungono diverse modalità sensoriali, e questo crea ulteriore confusione che il nostro cervello deve cercare di ordinare o riorganizzare.
Il nostro cervello non ha la capacità di elaborare più di un certo numero di informazioni. E cosa fa? Prende delle scorciatoie in alcuni casi. Se noi siamo allenati a fare un certo compito, magari quella scorciatoia è sufficiente per portarci nel punto corretto. Se non siamo preparati, rischiamo poi di sbagliare nel fare elaborare questa informazione. Di fatto, il nostro cervello dovrebbe essere in grado di elaborare un'informazione alla volta. E tutto il resto, tutte le altre informazioni semplicemente non le considera. Quando elaboriamo più di un'informazione è perché un'informazione c'è familiare, sappiamo già come trattarla e perciò impieghiamo meno energia, mettiamolo così, per elaborare quell'informazione, allora siamo in grado di dedicare un po' di maggiore energia all'altra informazione. Questa energia possiamo chiamarla attenzione di fatto.
We form our concepts and our beliefs and our opinions basically by seeing things, reading things, by exposure to things in the world. So what we're exposed to is hugely important to what we're going to end up thinking. Quando aumenta il consumo di verdura, aumentano anche le morti per annegamento. Come mai? Se una persona fa questa domanda a lezione, iniziano a pensarci gli studenti, ad un certo punto qualcuno inizia addirittura a ipotizzare che la digestione della verdura sia particolarmente... Quindi cerca di trovare un nesso causale. In realtà c'è una terza variabile che è l'estate, che porta a queste altre due variabili, cioè il consumo di verdura e le morti per annegamento, ad essere correlate, anche se loro non hanno una diretta influenza l'una sull'altra. Cioè d'estate consumiamo più verdura, andiamo più al mare in Italia e di conseguenza ci sono persone, anneghiamo di più, ma non c'è nessun nesso tra la verdura e Però la nostra, come dire, tendenza è quella di dire devo trovare un modo per cui se queste sono veramente, e non mi sta mentendo, queste due variabili sono correlate, ci deve essere una spiegazione, no? Certo. In realtà spesso non è così, cioè ci sono delle catene causali molto lunghe e magari due variabili non sono direttamente collegate da un nesso causale, ma noi tendiamo a sovrainterpretare, siamo molto predisposti a vedere dei nessi causali anche dove non ci sono. Ovviamente questo ci porta a fare delle inferenze folli. This is nearly a matter of providing people with the tools to actually do that investigation by themselves, right? And I feel those tools are not there at the moment. Educare le persone ad avere un po' più di controllo, ok? Sia sulla le informazioni che ricevono, l'affidabilità delle fonti, così, ma anche su cosa se ne fanno di queste informazioni, quindi sulla bontà di un'inferenza a partire da un'informazione, perché l'informazione può essere buona quanto vuoi, ma se poi l'inferenza che segue questa informazione non lo è, se è al punto di partenza, giusto, rischi di arrivare a una conclusione delirante.
Do you think that a big reality like BBC is trying to change something?
The BBC's most important Director General after Lord Reith, who invented it, was a man called John Birt, who's still alive. And he put the emphasis on proper facts in context and given their proper significance. But he was also understood that you have to make things popular and accessible. And he loved technology. He had an engineering background. So he was an incredible influence. And the guy who followed me at the BBC, he also used the phrase slow news. But really his ideas, like mine, all came from John Birt's original thought, which was intelligent interrogation of the world, facts in context, given proper significance, challenge of the journalist's prejudice, challenge of the audience's prejudice, but tell stories well, because you can give people as much fact as you want, but if you don't tell a story that touches them, it can be slow or fast, but it's not going to make any difference. So yes, in a sense, John would never have called it slow news, he would just call it good journalism.
We don't want to give one answer.
Of course.
Yes, of course.
Exactly.
We want to start to think about it.
Yeah, we want to try to change a part of the world. Why not?
Well, you can't ever do it if you don't try.
Yeah, of course.
We'll wait for Frédéric Martel. That's another journalist, a French journalist. I hope that you enjoy these days in Trento. We choose this location also to be calm, quiet, in the mountains, very relaxing, could be very useful for us to start to take our time, to start to think without pressure, and build something that could be the very core of something very important for the next years.
I think it's no coincidence that so many people have talked about slow news as the digital world has speeded up. But it's also that we're beginning to understand, probably for the first time in decades, that journalism cannot be taken for granted. It's the substance of liberal democracies. It's the information flow that feeds our populations for good or bad in liberal democracies. And if it becomes simply another commodity, you do something damaging to the nature of your democracies. However flawed those democracies are, that's what we all live in. The point about a democracy is you have a marketplace of ideas. You get there and you argue about the way your country should be going. You argue with each other, and in the end you have a vote, this is to put it very simply, and a certain path is taken for a period of time. But that requires you to have a conversation. And the less conversation there is, because media doesn't enable that conversation, the more challenged democracy is. Again, that is nothing new, but a history of the last century does not suggest that abolishing liberal democracy is going to necessarily make people any happier.
It was the idea of starting from slow food, but I think those three principles of slow food really apply to this situation, which are that it needs to be good, it needs to be clean, and it needs to be fair. As a professor of language and culture, I've been bringing students here for years to show them a different way of life. Because I think in the United States, everything is too fast all the time, like fast food. And I just appreciate the culture where people slow down and take time to eat and take time to enjoy each other's company.
I don't think slow is good by itself, or I don't think accelerated or quick journalism is necessarily bad. I do believe we need sustainable economics model to be able to do both quick journalism and slow journalism, and I think it's not necessarily contradiction. At the core of fake news and all these things, you have unpaid journalism. That's the key. You have people that have to write tons of brief articles without being able to do research.
Per condizioni lavorative dignitose non si intende soltanto il salario alla fine del mese, ma il tempo che devo passare dietro un computer, il mio diritto a uscire per strada a vedere ciò che accade e non semplicemente stare dietro uno schermo ad aspettare che le cose accadano.
We need what I will call a positive economy. That's an expression by the French poet Arthur Rimbaud, and he defined positive economy as something that will allow him to write poetry, but at the same time being able to eat and to survive. Pour les musiciens, le live est aujourd'hui le cœur du modèle économique. Un musicien, il gagne peu sa vie aujourd'hui par la vente de CD et un peu par Spotify, Deezer. Par contre, il arrive très fortement à gagner sa vie à travers des live events. Au fond, qu'est-ce que c'est le live pour un écrivain, pour un journaliste? Ce sont les conférences. Et donc, la clé, c'est que les conférences doivent être rémunérées pour ces écrivains et ces journalistes.
Se prima leggevamo, non abbiamo smesso di leggere, abbiamo smesso di usare gli stessi mezzi, non leggiamo più magari solo carta stampata, leggiamo sul web, ci informiamo sul web e senti dalla gente nelle chiacchiere al bar dire ho letto su internet. Ho letto su internet è una frase bellissima perché prima ho letto, quindi quella gente legge. Il problema è intanto l'organizzazione, cioè i social network hanno fatto sì che ci fosse una bulimia di informazione. Tu puoi spizzicare qua e là senza aver capito cosa hai mangiato realmente, ma al tempo stesso è gente che ha voglia di andare oltre, tant'è che i siti cosiddetti di fake news che hanno funzionato di più sono quelli che hanno puntato tutto sulla contronarrazione. E allora facciamola noi la contronarrazione. Cominciamo a destabilizzare il sistema trattando gli stessi argomenti in un modo diverso.
In some sense, we're becoming cultural agents, right? Because we're going to have to change culture. Yeah. And we're going to have to use our knowledge and our experience to find ways to communicate with everyone what this vision of culture is.
I think one of the things that's been most interesting about this conversation this morning has been how little we've talked about the audience.
Yeah. Yes.
So you talked at the beginning about talking to people who are out on the street. That's not remotely scientific, but it's always a useful snapshot. And their skepticism about journalism, their refusal to pay for what they see as a commodity.
I don't agree with the fact that people won't pay for news. We have said that for years about music, and right now people are paying either Spotify or Apple Music or Deezer.
So speaking as the pessimist in the group, I don't think Spotify is remotely comparable because I use Spotify. It's about entertainment, it's about pleasure, it's about huge amounts of choice. It's about trusting the music in some sense. Your information about the audience not trusting journalism outside of a sort of well-educated elite is really important. They're not going to pay for stuff they don't essentially trust.
You cannot compare today to the past and say people are not only the elite by newspaper. It has been always the case. The New York Times has more subscriptors now than it was 50 or 20 years ago.
Of course. You're absolutely right. There's only ever been a section of the population that were interested in in-depth and specialism. But a whole load of other people are getting stuff that none of us think is journalism now. And that is the thing that worries me as we go forward. The most important battle is to make sure that quality news survives for everybody, not just an elite that have the money, time and education, but everybody has access. You can't make people believe things, but you can give them choices in terms of the information they have about a story or a situation. So one of the most important things that mainstream media must do is learn not to repeat the rumours that come from disinformation. This is a battle for verified facts in proper context, for the significance of stories. And actually, I think it's a battle for the quality of our democracies. Because information, proper information, is the lifeblood of those democracies. It's one of the reasons, after the Second World War, so much public money went into creating impartial newsrooms, public service broadcasters, because we just lived through a conflagration that started off with massive propaganda. The heart of slow news, at the heart of quality journalism, is explaining a complex world in an accessible way to broad audiences without reducing the complexity to such an extent that it's like a caricature. And that's a really big challenge for people, journalists and producers and documentary makers and the rest. It is not an easy task. So slow news is incredibly important in that sense, but we shouldn't underestimate the difficulties.
Dopo che abbiamo sentito le obiezioni di Frederick e di Helen in particolare, ho pensato a una cosa sulla quale devo ammettere non avevo riflettuto a sufficienza, no? Perché c'è bisogno dell'etichetta? Alla fine slow journalism è soltanto un altro modo di dire quello che è il buon giornalismo. E io invece ho capito che non sono proprio d'accordo. Sarà che adesso mi sono appassionato a questa serie TV Sense8, magari sono un po' condizionato, però alla base di questa cosa qua secondo me c'è proprio, oltre all'etica, un desiderio profondo di condivisione. Per me le parole chiave che noi dobbiamo aggiungere sono proprio queste: condivisione, comunità, stile di vita. Slow news non è soltanto buon giornalismo, non è soltanto un brand, ma è proprio un modo diverso di fare le cose.
Andrea! Alberto! Buongiorno! Good to see you. How are you? The telephone's ringing. Let me get that and see. It might be an important news call.
Oh, okay.
Hello. Sheila.
Ah, Sheila. Say hello.
We're shooting a scene here in front of the Pioneer statue. And I'll call you in 2 minutes. Okay, bye.
So, show us the office.
Yeah, the office is right over here.
Yeah.
Look at Allen Hall.
What do you expect from Monday and Tuesday?
I know Monday and Tuesday will be terrific as we meet each other, as we hear from each other. I'm particularly looking forward to our music school professor playing Mozart's clarinet concerto in A major, the Adagio, which will slow us all down nicely.
Wonderful. So let's do that.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Let me tell you a little story, because Deborah and I also take this class. We'll do it next summer. We will take probably 18 students to Cordova, Alaska, and the only place you get reliable Wi-Fi is you go downtown to what's called Baja Taco, and it's fun to watch the students melt down because nothing works. It's like, so what? You're in the most beautiful place in the world. You're surrounded by the most beautiful wildlife and environments you can possibly imagine, and you give a shit about what's on your phone? Who cares at that point?
Okay, want to try an experiment?
No.
Oh, come on. Will anybody agree not to use your phone till dinner time? Okay.
It's because you're a Luddite.
Pardon me? Yes.
Oh my God, okay. There you
Do you want my phone in return?
Pardon me? I want your phone, and you come by, give me your phone, and you come by.
I'm gonna need to text her to get something.
I know, there you go.
And I'll be texting you.
You come by. You come by. You come by the Willow Room for lunch. Join us for lunch, and you get your phone back.
Here's what's funny about this. Deborah will be downstairs because she got a place on the couch where she always works. And I'll be upstairs because I have a place upstairs where I always work. And we text each other.
It is kind of romantic. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Professors Morrison. I have to fetch my phone now. Whoops, I don't want to break this place. Good morning. I'm going to have to turn on my radio voice clearly. Good morning. And a hearty welcome to the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication Slow News and More Slow Conference.
A school shooting, a breaking news shooting, this is the very definition of fast news. And what happens is it happens on social media. People post video, they post tweets, they ask what's going on, people are watching it, things are happening, all this stuff is going on, and you need to get that information out.
What we see are these breaking news reports filled with speculation, often with misinformation. We have details of the perpetrator that emerge. We then have these reporters and pundits questioning whether or not it was an act of terrorism. We then see politicians responding with thoughts and prayers, as well as these debates about mental health coverage and gun control.
We interview people. That's what we do. So I've done it. I've covered a mass casualty. I've done these type of things. What do? You show up, you look for people, you start talking to them. I've never been trained in how to deal with someone who's been through a trauma. I don't have any psychological training. I've never been giving it. When I show up at a scene where there's a crime, what do? I do the same thing as I do when I show up at the first day of summer in the swimming pool. What I'm learning is that trauma victims have tricky memories and that they don't always remember everything that happened in clarity. What I'm learning is that asking them to repeat something over and over, which is what happens when 20 journalists show up and talk to somebody and nobody feels like they can leave because what if she says something good now and nobody wants to disappoint their editor. As that goes on, that's not psychologically healthy for the people who we're interviewing. It's not the same as interviewing somebody else, but we treat it like it is.
How do you get a photo of a victim? Do you just pull it off of Facebook? Do you ask the family for it? What happens? There's all these pieces that happen here. These are legitimate questions that need to be answered. These are important parts of the narrative. But in our hurry to run through and to do this, what happens is there's a void. We have to wait until we know who the victims are. So during those hours and hours that this take, where did the focus on this case go? It went to the perpetrator. There are always more photos of the perpetrator than there are of the victim.
All of this plays out usually within 2 to 3 days. This story usually falls off of the news media agenda 3 days, maybe a week if it happens to be an especially tragic mass shooting, which is a terrible sentence to have to even say.
What we do is, when there's breaking news, we show up, we do it, and then people get tired of us and we leave.
Maybe rather than redundancies all round, maybe if we can be part of the movement that helps create a public appetite for the sort of journalism that we want to promote and create, perhaps the robots can do the boring, fast work and resources will be freed up for journalists to spend more time on the slow work.
Bingo. If you don't want to be replaced by a robot, don't write like a robot.
It's been lovely to see how many women are involved with this because as Peter was introducing me as editor, I often have to clarify with people when they say, what do you do at the Weekly? And I say, I'm the editor. And they're like, oh, which part? And I'm like, really, the whole thing. Like, I'm the editor, swear to God. And it takes them a minute to actually believe that. They're pretty sure there's someone lurking in the background. And I'm like, no, the only person in the background is the other woman who actually owns the paper. The Weekly itself was founded in the 1980s, and it was called What's Happening. And it was called What's Happening because that's apparently exactly what it was. It was what was happening in the town that day. It was founded by a collective of women who were passionate about the community, they were passionate about politics and the arts, and they just wanted to get that out to the community. And so that's what they did, and it was very pie in the sky. They didn't have a whole lot of funding for it. They actually would trade. We'll give you an advertisement if you give us coffee. We'll give you an advertisement if you give us breakfast. And they sustained the paper that way. One of the values of an alt weekly is this local focus, this connection to the community, the in-depth reporting and storytelling that is affected by the digital age, but is not destroyed by it. And that's what, again, brings me to slow news. When Peter first brought up the topic with me, I have to admit I wasn't all that familiar with slow news as a specific concept, but more I went, oh, well, that's actually what we've been doing. That's what alt weeklies, many of them, have been doing. It's what our focus is. These small communities are often where these really big stories get launched, and small community papers are often the source for things. I mean, look at Michigan, the Flint water crisis. That didn't start with a national story. That started with a small community story that then became huge. Kind of maybe an odd comparison, but if you've ever read Stephen King, the horror novelist, when you read his books, it's never just he picked up a candy bar. It's never just he drove a car. It's always he picked up a Reese's Pieces. He drove a Corvette. He gives everything something that you can relate to, that sort of moment where you're like, oh, I eat that candy. Oh, I drive that car, or I've seen one of those. It's never generic. It's never general. It's always very, very specific. And I think that's something with a local story where there's an element of specificity that you have in there. So people are like, that's my neighbor. That's the street that's 2 doors down from me. That people sort of look at, and it gives them that sense of like, this is happening to me in my area. That doesn't make as much sense if you're doing a sort of a more global story. They don't need to know that it was on Friendly Street.
Narrative is such a key part of what we do, and of course a good story, it has a narrative arc, it has twists, it has plot development, and it has hopefully an ending. And I think part of the problem with fast journalism is you don't get the middle bit, you don't get the ending.
I came to grab my phone before I go to my next class, but the only thing that I miss, it's funny that you bring this up because I have been deleting apps off my phone, but the only thing I miss it for is music. I don't really mind about anything else, but it's the only thing that I miss. So I've been struggling because when I'm not doing anything, I just will aimlessly scroll. Yeah. So now I have to delete the app when I'm not posting something, and then I post, and then I'll delete it again, and then.
Spectacular!
Yes,
You're
I just
my girl here.
Trying to get there. So.
On the slow
Thank
news
you.
movement.
I'm excited
and also,
to read your book. Thank you for that.
And that was fun. And tell me what you think after you read it, please.
Urban farms are 2-acre, thereabouts, outdoor classroom laboratory that's here at the University of Oregon, where we host about 325 students a year come to learn primarily how to grow food. And when you start teaching about growing food, it turns into a lot of other conversations. We try to get them to start thinking about the choices they make when they're buying their food, right? And you do it from the ground up, right? You start with the ground and teach them tools. We depend on a massive industrial system that has divorced our understanding for a lot of people about food. There's a price to pay for efficiency, you know. The price is expensive.
Food and Freedom is about a slow food movement. There's Slow Food Nation, the Slow Food Revolution, and Terra Madre is about a global network of sustainable communities. So it's not just about you, the individual person, doing what's right for you, you know, what you enjoy or whatnot, but about connecting with other people, with farmers markets and CSAs and all of these other strategies.
Heaven is this table of food, all the most beautiful food that this guy ever said, and he looks at it and he goes, yes, this is heaven. And he goes to sit down and he realizes he can't reach it. His hand is just too short. All the food is right there, but he cannot reach it. And he says, this cannot be heaven. And his host says, oh, well, you get the long fork. And they give him a long fork. Now he can reach all his food. And he's like, heaven. And then he realizes with the fork, you can't turn it and eat. It's too long. He said, this cannot be heaven. And then his friends came, and everybody could feed each other. And that's what heaven is, right?
Yes, the building is on fire, right? The profession is on fire. The planet is on fire. Our political system is in flames, you know, but when everything is kind of up for grabs like this, maybe this is a point where change is possible, where we recognize that, you know, radical measures need to be taken. Maybe people need hope, not just that things can be slightly less bad than they are, but that something good lies ahead, you know, that we can have a grand vision to strive for rather than just thinking, you know, in small terms. Maybe we do need to think bigger.
It's my great pleasure to introduce from our School of Music and Dance here at the University of Oregon, Won Kim.
When you think of the lower pitch in physical sense, they operate in a much slower frequency. So if you want to make the connection with the slowness, lower is slow by definition. Of course, we do need all spectrum of everything, the fast, slow, loud dynamic, soft dynamic. But I think the most effective way to catch the audience is rather than pouring our number of notes and dynamic into the audience, but is to draw everybody in towards you. And that works when things are slow, when things are soft, when things are calm. And one thing also to think about is that, you know, just the way that our heart beats. When we are at absolute peace and rest, it stays around 60 to 100 beats per minute. Adagio usually clicks around quarter note is equal to 60, which means the beat happens every 60 times a minute. So, you know, that's about the ideal time where our heart is in communion with the perfect rest. So I think there's something to that where, you know, everything sort of converges at that pace, that this is the very natural place for the humans, and a good reason to advocate the slowness itself.
One of the most interesting things that we are discovering now doing this documentary is that in a lot of parts of the world there are many people that they are building many products. What we are trying to do is just make a network of this idea.
It's a good idea.
And try to spread with a little bit much louder voice.
Delayed gratification started as an idea in 2010. And Matthew and I had met back in about 2004 when we were both working in Dubai on Time Out magazine. I was the editor, he was the food critic, and along with 3 other guys, we were making this magazine, we were having lots of fun, working through the night. We were learning how to make magazines, we were young, we were enjoying it, we were going out and seeing the city and the region and so on. And then it came to 2010, we were all back in London, and we started talking about the media landscape that we saw and how awful it was. Is that about right?
Pretty much, yeah. I think that was the first time we used the phrase slow journalism that night.
Yeah.
But we knew we wanted to make a magazine with a focus on long-form narrative non-fiction.
In the face of the internet, the entire news publishing industry was still panicking, still had no idea how to deal with it. So we all had this background in print magazines. We thought, let's do something that's the opposite of what people were talking about. Let's do something that is print instead of digital. Let's do something that looks at a 3-month period instead of giving an immediate knee-jerk reaction. Let's do something that is funded by readers and subscribers rather than advertisers.
The story about Zetland begins with me and my 3 co-founders. We all had fine jobs in legacy media. We realized that if the tradition for the solid, the good reported stories that was used to be linked to paper, if it had to survive, someone had to do it in a digital version. And so we quit our jobs, and then we founded Zetland. It's a digital newspaper that publish only very few stories a day, 2 or 3 stories a day. It's about what's going on in the world, so it's news in that sense. But we connect the dots. We not only say that, so this happened, but we also try to say it happened because of this, and then maybe we also have to understand that in order to grapple with the issue. And that takes time.
Il giornale è uscito il primo numero nel novembre del 93. Io avevo 27 anni ed ero il più anziano del gruppo e l'unico con un po' di esperienza nel campo del giornalismo. Gli altri 4, che sono 4 dei vice direttori attuali ancora oggi, facevano l'università all'epoca, chi storia dell'arte, chi lettere e filosofia, chi scienze politiche. I miei amici comunque andavano in vacanza. Anche se era molto duro e difficile, lavoravamo un sacco, avevamo stipendi ridicoli, eccetera, facevamo un giornale che era nostro.
It's a huge privilege as a journalist and as an editor to have the freedom we have on this magazine. And sometimes, I'm not a very ambitious person. Sometimes I think this is amazing, this is enough, this is great. But we should be reaching far more people. We know that we're making a pretty good magazine, and that there are so many people out there who've never heard of delayed gratification or slow journalism who would enjoy this magazine, and we need to reach them.
I was editor-in-chief of a print newspaper where I tried to change the idea of what is news already in that existing traditional print newspaper. And I failed because I was fired. People said, this is not news. The word today is not in the newspaper anymore. And I said, well, I don't want the word today in the newspaper anymore because it doesn't tell you anything about the world we live in. So I was fired, and then I thought, let's do it ourselves. I went on the TV and said, this is my idea. If you support the idea, become a member. We set a world record in crowdfunding. We had almost $1.7 million, and we could start the Correspondent. We didn't really know what we were doing, so it took a couple of months, and we were like, hopefully this works.
It was 2008. Me and my colleague Astrid, we're working both for Marie Claire, the glossy magazine, and we were sort of disappointed sometimes about the stories in the magazine because they were never about our lives. Our lives were just with a lot of pressure and small kids, and we felt like we failed all the time because we did not have the right clothes or the right bags or the right sunglasses. And we thought it's so strange that there's not a magazine about us and our lives and what goes wrong in our lives. And I talked to my doctor about it, and she said, maybe you can do a mindfulness course. That's something new, and sort of nobody nobody had heard about it 10 years ago. But she said, I think this will help you be a bit more relaxed and to slow down a bit and have a new view on your life. So I went there and I asked Astrid, my colleague, I said, maybe it's something also for you. And we went there for 8 weeks. We did a mindfulness-based stress reduction training. And there we learned so many lessons about life. Awareness and attention was such a powerful tool. And we thought, let's try to put those lessons in the magazine. So that's how we started the magazine Flow.
Valigia Blu è nata da una forma di attivismo. Io stavo ascoltando il TG1 ai tempi di Berlusconi e a un certo punto il conduttore dice che l'avvocato Mills è stato prosciolto e in realtà si trattava di una prescrizione, non di un'assoluzione. E accanto a me c'era Chris, che è inglese, e stava seguendo ovviamente la storia dai giornali e dai media inglesi e a quel punto gli saltò per aria e disse però non si può fare così perché se passa questo passa tutto. E io là mi resi conto che invece io avevo assorbito quella cosa che era una falsa notizia con normalità. E l'allarme l'ho percepito da Chris. Ho detto, beh, effettivamente quella è una notizia falsa che è passata sul servizio pubblico. Io postai questa richiesta di rettifica su Facebook e nel giro di una settimana la gente così spontaneamente decise di sottoscrivere con un like o con un commento quella richiesta di rettifica al TG1. Io stampai queste firme, scassando la fotocopiatrice dell'ufficio che avevo, e le misi in questa valigia, che era blu. Il simbolo poi è diventato la valigia perché quella valigia conteneva le voci dei cittadini che chiedevano una rettifica. Le portai davanti alla RAI, dopo un po' la RAI praticamente mi hanno ricevuto, perché io stavo là fuori a fare muina, mi hanno ricevuto, mi hanno fatto entrare, io ho scaraventato queste firme sul loro tavolo, sì, non è successo niente, cioè la rettifica fino non l'hanno fatta, però la sera cambiarono versione e dissero nella TG serale che effettivamente c'era stata una prescrizione, non un'assoluzione, che sono due cose diverse. Senza rettifica una notizia non corretta diventa falsa. Finita questa avventura, molte persone che avevano partecipato mi chiesero di non finirla qua, cioè non ti fermare, facciamo qualcosa. A quel punto nasce il sito Valigia Blu, che diventa poi col tempo proprio una forma di watchdog non verso la politica, o comunque non solo verso la politica, ma anche verso il giornalismo.
For the longest time, we didn't really interact with our readers. And I always said, I'm fed up of brands trying to be my best friend. Like, you know, so can we just give you a little survey? What do you think of this? Do you think it was great? Can you choose our cover online? All this sort of stuff. I was like, no, if this is anything, this is old school. This is not interactive. We'll make something great, and if you like it, continue to buy it. And if you don't, that's fine, don't worry about it. And then I was relating this to this guy who was giving us some business advice. He was a lovely guy from Barcelona, and he liked the magazine, and he was a big publishing brain. And he said, so what's your interaction with your readers? I was like, well, we don't do it because of this. And he was like, no. That's not the reason you don't talk to your readers. You don't talk to your readers because you're scared that they don't like your magazine and they'll tell you something that you don't want to hear. I was like, yeah, that is actually it. that is correct. So we try to be better about it. We have these really regular events now where we actually get to meet and speak to people.
Vale la pena segnalare certamente Ferrara, il festival, nato un po' per caso, ma insomma che poi è cresciuto ed è diventato per la redazione e per i lettori un momento di incontro fondamentale.
We have live shows where we put journalism on stage in a theater and meet with 1,000 members at a time and share stories from a theater stage. Maybe you should come when we have one of these live shows.
Yes.
Because there's definitely another kind of
When
vision.
you were talking, I thought that we have to interview your members.
Yeah, that could be fun.
I think being able to meet the guys who write the articles is, first of all, it's a lot of fun. But second of all, you get to feel that there are people behind the news that you read.
I think it's great. It's on time that we do it a little bit different. I mean, come on.
Okay.
Let's try a lot of different new things. Maybe something will not work, but this really works.
Tonight we're doing a journalistic live show. We call it Zetland Live. And tonight it's about a book that Sarah have been writing?
This is the first time it's my book, I'm on stage. Normally we would have different journalists talk about, there might be like a theme, and then we have different journalists with each their story, but still with the effects of the theater. This time it's just me.
We are trying to take journalism into the stage of a theater, and this is the theater we're in tonight.
Welcome to. The article is not the end. The article is like the beginning of, this is where we start talking.
Med noget skole. Ja, tager vi lidt skole.
We've had some really special conversations, I think, afterwards. I love that part of it, that you can actually meet the people that you write to. And in this show, we're also going to end it with like a debate where people can say whatever they want to me, which is a bit exciting. So I have no idea what they will say. I don't think it's necessarily just for niche media. This is the way we have to go.
How much do you pay for an article?
For a freelance story, we pay 500 euros.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, can I send you some?
One of the TV news channels here has got a claim about, just something, always being first to the news. I'm like, well, yeah, but you can be, but that's not really what we want. We want to be right, rather than being kind of first. So almost going the other way and being like, always last in breaking news.
Everywhere, the news has some basic ingredients. It's about unusual, sensational, exceptional events that happen on a specific day. So although the news promises to give you a picture of the world that tells you what is happening in the world, it is actually the opposite. It tells you what is not happening on a daily basis, because the normal, the unsensational, the ordinary, is not in the picture. Mm-hmm. And because of this, the most influential developments, the most influential structures in society that kind of explain these unusual events that you see in the news are left out completely. The metaphor we always use here is news is about the weather, but it's not about the climate.
It's definitely to our advantage that we didn't exist before. So we can really claim, with authority, we want to build another media system. We want to make journalism in another way. That wouldn't be easy if we came from the legacy media business. On the other hand, they have muscles that we don't have.
News not only misrepresents the world in a fundamental way, but it also leaves you cynical. It makes us more divided, and it shows the world in a way that kind of makes you feel powerless. It's like you're the audience of this world that gets worse every day, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's why people also get frustrated so much. Suppose you are locked up in a room for 20 years, mm-hmm. and you just see the news, just cable news all day, and you have a newspaper. No books, no other people to talk to, just news. Would you go outside after
never.
20 years? No way would I go outside, because it would be some kind of war crazy. People would be like, I would not trust anybody. I would be cynical. I would feel powerless completely. I would cannot change anything about this. This is the kind of worldview you would really like a population to have if you say, hey, just give me the power, I will fix it all. This dangerous world out there, I will fix it. You cannot, I can.
Il fatto che il nostro stipendio è pagato in larghissima misura da chi ci compra e da chi ci legge ti mette in un ascolto, diciamo, no? Diverso nei confronti di chi ti legge.
Che non vuol dire farsi dettare la linea editoriale da loro,
no.
Come pensano molti, no? Perché
Anzi, io credo che un giornale che alliscia il lettore è un giornale che dopo un po' ti annoia. Questo giornale devo scoprire delle cose che non sapevo, e alcune di queste cose mi devono anche far arrabbiare, se è il caso.
If there's a third party financing it, you will have a different objective.
It changes the relationship between media and reader and user, because then the user, the reader, becomes the product.
Advertisers are not interested in informing the reader. Advertisers are interested in targeting specific kinds of people that would be interested in buying their product.
Their attention becomes the product that we can sell to ad companies.
Very basic model for a century.
We have another paywall model that was inspired by the Correspondent in Holland, and they came up with this brilliant paywall model. I call it the generous model. So it works this way.
We don't have a paywall. If people want to read anything we do, they can. If they find a shared link, they can read the whole thing without limit. It just says on top of the article, this article has been given to you as a gift by paying member and then the name of the member. So people understand this is free for me, but somebody else made it possible that it was written.
So our members help us spread the word about our content, and they want to do that. And on the same time, they help us spread our content.
We like to call our readers the people formerly known as the audience. Engaged citizens that want to be informed about the world around them, and you establish a new kind of relationship directly by them having to finance your journalism and you collaborating with them on that journalism. A lot of people amongst our readers have some kind of expertise. They're either doctors or teachers or climate scientists or something else. And we ask them, help us understand these things that are important to all of us. So in a sense, you form some kind of knowledge community of people who want to understand the world around them and help each other. People explicitly tell us that they don't want exclusivity to our content. It's the opposite. They want to pay for it to be out there, for other people to see it as well. It's much more a sense of value to society they want to bring, instead of just consuming it one-on-one.
Il giornale, un po' come tutti i giornali, ma certamente internazionale, sono un prodotto collettivo, di un'intelligenza collettiva, diciamo. Il fatto che ci sia una maggioranza di donne, anche 2 delle 4 vice direttrici sono donne, quello è un elemento che ha contribuito a fare il giornale nel modo in cui è, alle relazioni e alle dinamiche dentro la redazione. Quelle sono cose che appunto magari non hanno a che vedere con il fatto che facciamo un giornale, più a che vedere in generale con il clima che si respira in una società, tra un gruppo di persone, eccetera, eccetera, e certamente sono stato un elemento che ha influito.
Every morning we meet and say which stories are important for our readers to know, not tomorrow, but next week.
I think it's important that the values you have as a publication has to be the same values that that's throughout the organization. So if we say that we are honest and transparent and humorous sometimes in the way we do journalism, that's how we want everything to be. Our meetings, the way we talk to each other, the way we talk to our members, the way we answer questions on Facebook. So we hope that the tone that we have when we sing in the morning or we have meetings is the same tone that we have in our journalism, and that feeling will somehow manifest itself as something that makes us credible and feel like people doing important work that we think is important. And that will, in some way, you will be able to feel that on the other side.
We love journalism, we think journalism is important, but we don't make journalism for our sake. It's a service for the public. So that's why we don't publish our journalism in a paper pamphlet that no one knows where to get, right? You have to be out there, you have to solve a problem for the audience.
We always focus on problems and solutions. We never tell you what's wrong unless we can also give you some kind of perspective or ask you for some kind of perspective on how we can fix it.
L'altro giorno ho fatto una discussione con un direttore di un giornale che non nominerò ovviamente, che a un certo punto ha sbottato e mi ha detto sì, è vero, noi perdiamo il 5% di copie ogni anno, però sono arrivato alla conclusione che è colpa dei lettori. Cosa si può dire a qualcuno che pensi che sia colpa dei lettori? Non so.
Che continuerà a perdere il 5% di copie all'anno.
Et comment on fait dans un monde idéal pour allouer les aides? Mais je dis que si les médias sont des fondations, eh bien pensons l'aide de l'État comme une subvention aux dons qui sont faits à ces fondations. Donc très précisément, ce que je dis, c'est que voilà, on a des médias à but non lucratif qui peuvent recevoir des dons de la part des citoyens et l'État va abonder ces dons. Donc je donne 100 € à America et l'État derrière va donner 200 € supplémentaires. L'État n'a pas du tout son mot à dire, puisque pour le coup, le choix de soutenir tel ou tel média est vraiment fait par les citoyens. Le système est clair et complètement transparent. Ça permet quoi, en plus d'avoir un financement public des médias? Ça permet de faire rentrer les citoyens dans le jeu et de rendre d'une certaine manière les citoyens actionnaires, entre guillemets, de leurs médias. Et ça, c'est le second aspect de la société de médias à but non lucratif, c'est de repenser la gouvernance des médias, de limiter le pouvoir des plus gros actionnaires extérieurs et de donner davantage de pouvoir, c'est-à-dire de droit de vote, aux citoyens d'une part et aux journalistes de l'autre. Ensuite, je pense que mon modèle, ça va permettre de faire émerger de nouveaux médias indépendants et ça se fera au détriment d'un certain nombre de médias existants qui ont perdu leur indépendance, notamment par rapport à leurs actionnaires. Pour moi, c'est pas un problème qu'il y ait des médias qui meurent, tant qu'il y en a de nouveaux qui se créent. Ce qui est important, c'est qu'il y ait autant de cartes de presse, pour le dire vite, ou plus de journalistes. C'est le journalisme qui compte, c'est pas que telle ou telle marque apparaisse ou disparaisse. Et puis après, moi, mon modèle, c'est un pari pour l'avenir. C'est-à-dire qu'en démocratisant la gouvernance des médias, en développant des médias à but non lucratif, l'idée, c'est de récupérer petit à petit la confianza.
Noi siamo passati dal dire che no, Twitter e i social network avevano prodotto Obama e le primavere arabe a demonizzarli perché producono Trump e i populismi insomma è sempre quello però Twitter,
è isterica come reazione,
diciamo è quella cosa lì, quindi forse c'è un problema altrove.
Facebook, quel rôle a eu jusqu'ici dans cette crise? Quel rôle peut avoir aussi en positif pour sortir de ça?
Faut les taxer. Il faut redistribuer l'argent de Facebook à ceux qui produisent du journalisme. Et je dis bien, il faut les taxer. C'est-à-dire qu'on a de plus en plus Google, Facebook qui font soi-disant preuve de charité. En disant, écoutez, oui, c'est vrai, on utilise des contenus et d'ailleurs on a besoin de ces producteurs de contenu, donc on va leur faire la charité. Et on va leur donner quelques millions d'euros, sachant que ce qu'ils leur donnent, en fait, c'est vraiment une goutte d'eau par rapport, à ce qu'ils ont coûté aux médias traditionnels, et puis deux, à ce qu'ils gagnent eux-mêmes grâce au contenu produit par ces médias traditionnels. Donc moi, je pense que ces principaux acteurs, il faut les taxer fortement au niveau européen, au niveau également des États-Unis. Il faut les taxer fortement et ensuite il faut mettre en place un système de redistribution de cet argent en faveur des différents médias. Et là où il faudra être extrêmement attentif, c'est sur la gouvernance finalement de cette agence qui redistribuera l'argent levé auprès des grandes plateformes.
Il mio obiettivo principale è avere un'informazione forte e avere un giornalismo forte, perché con un giornalismo forte è una democrazia forte. E il mio interesse è avere una società forte. Quindi io se critico, se metto in discussione, se voglio, ti cerco per avere una discussione, perché il mio obiettivo è la mia società, è la mia democrazia, non è per rompere le palle.
Già. È lì che abbiamo sbagliato a interpretare il watchdog. Il watchdog non rompe le palle,
Esatto.
il watchdog ha un
Esatto.
obiettivo.
È l'obiettivo, è la società forte, i cittadini forti, la democrazia forte. Io voglio che i nostri giornali, i nostri media siano credibili e forti.
We're not the saviors of anything. Like, if anything, we're just an antidote to what's going on.
Il faudrait se dépêcher. Non, mais c'est un peu comme la crise du climat, c'est-à-dire que ça fait tellement longtemps que ça a commencé et en même temps c'est tellement urgent d'agir, donc le plus vite sera le mieux. Ensuite, ce qui est intéressant, c'est de savoir dans quelle mesure cette crise des médias est un symptôme ou une cause du populisme. En fait, c'est une espèce de cercle vicieux.
News is about the first time stuff happens. Usually it's not, but it's what they think it's about. Journalists think, oh, this is new because it's the first time. Most things in the world that are actually important are repetitions. You cannot say, today the climate changed.
No, it is changing.
It is changing. We know it changed, but you cannot say today it changed. And because you cannot say today it changed, the phenomenon itself is never news. It's always news because something else, like for example a demonstration or a report or some politician who says something crazy about it, that is news. But it's never the fact itself is never news, which is, considering its impact, completely crazy.
Du coup, finalement, il faut avoir espoir pour...
Il faut toujours avoir espoir. On est trop jeune pour être défaitiste.
Years ago, when I wrote the book, Slow News, it was a hope, but it's happening. And what's amazing is the way it's happening around the globe with different people in different places, using different media, all realizing without talking with each other, without hearing about each other's work, are practicing slow news. And now that slow news movement is coming together, and we're finding each other. And it's making the movement more powerful because we can learn from each other, we can share information, techniques, ideas, personnel, and that noise will always be there, but compensated by good journalism. And it's no longer just a hope.
Journalism is changing. A lot of people say that it's a dying field. I think it's just evolving in many different aspects of telling information and receiving it as well. And I'm excited to be a part of journalism, and I'm excited to be a part of that generation that can change the way that we spread news and share information. So.
Io sono iscritta all'Ordine dei giornalisti e nel 2017, ottobre credo, mi sono imbattuta in questo corso che indicava come verificare le fonti e identificare quelle che io chiamo disinformazioni. E quindi ho fatto questo corso online e ho visto te che tenevi il corso, poi ho visto il teaser del vostro docufilm sul Slow News, ho visto Peter e ho detto lo voglio in Italia. Per questo abbiamo deciso di portarcelo nel nostro distretto consolare e di farne dei programmi, sia con i ragazzi delle scuole di giornalismo che in 2 bellissime tavole rotonde alla Stampa e al Corriere della Sera.
You make us dream.
Well,
because you're doing what we would like to do, but we can't.
Well, that's just an extraordinarily gracious thing to say,
Yeah.
but of course you can.
Yes, I mean, you should go upstairs and talk to the CEO.
Okay.
And tell us that he should give us more time and...
Not a
and
problem.
said instead of doing 4 jobs every day, you only do one.
Every 2 days.
Yes.
Okay.
I like it.
Okay.
I sign.
Take me up there.
C'è anche un altro aspetto della nostra attività. Noi mandiamo anche persone selezionate in Italia negli Stati Uniti proprio per mettere le persone a contatto con la realtà americana. E, scoop, tu sei stato selezionato per uno di questi.
Journalists and the readers together.
No media watchdog in each.
Publish with us.
Both of my reporters are lawyers.
Just make up.
Exercise some control over.
And that it's about a relationship.
You know this, I'm sure. It was overwhelming.
User-centered design thinking.
And as I grew up, I saw some stuff in the news and with journalists that I think we could be doing better.
Put all these in a documentary movie.